Kia ora everyone. Thank you for inviting us to come along today and talk about affectionately known the K Valley, Kopurererua Valley. Kia ora, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. My name's Dianne Paton. I'm representing Tauranga City Council and I've been managing this Valley project for the last 5 or so years. I've invited Geoff Canham to come along and help me speak today because Geoff was my manager when I started here 19 years ago, and he played a very big role in acquiring the valley and working with the local people. And so I'm going to let Geoff start the presentation and talk about the beginning of the valley. Thank you, Geoff.
Te whare e tūnei, te marae, te tamatea pukai whenua e taunei. Nā rangatira, nā hau e whā, nā nai tamarawaho te koutou nei. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Geoff Canham aho. It's been a real privilege to come today and give some background to Dianne's crescendo. So I'm the softener, so bear with me. So this is about the origins of what's pretty rare in the world. Not too many cities on our planet have a 364 hectare wetland downtown. So Tauranga has that, and from very humble beginnings, we have a Weta Workshop version and a real version. So that's the scale of it. So in terms of Tauranga, that's how big it is in relation to the rest of the city. And it's a valley that has a very important story, and while it's not mine to tell, you may recognise that as the Waikereau estuary with Mo'o in the background and Tuhua further behind that in the sea. And the channels in the estuary are carved by a legendary ancestor, Taurikura, that carved those with its tail on its way to Kārewa, still on that design you can see to the far left, and the lizard still lives on Kārewa today as tuatara. The valley has had a long history of change. Once upon a time, it was probably, as you could imagine it, outstanding stormwater, but also a very large valley of mostly flax and pure wetland. But it's significant to us as a nation as the advance and retreat path for the Battle of Gate Pa, and a valley with numerous pa sites on it. And along came us, and we've done some cool things to this valley, like put a toll road on it. But once upon a time, it was mostly in private ownership. And in 1996-97, TCC bought the whole valley, and part of West Ridge as well, emboldened by the Meadowviews development in Welcome Bay. And it bought it because it was going to be a continuation of Birch Avenue all the way to State Highway 29. It was all going to be industrial, the whole lot. And plans were afoot, and a business case was done. It was acquired under the Public Works Act. The district plan change was underway. And then magically, the height above Motoriki datum changed, and you could no longer put a building platform in that valley. There's lots of information that we can share, but these days we use different language. That valley is actually a massive carbon sink opportunity. And the vision for the valley was something which I think authorities in the past had struggled with. And fundamentally, about 1997, Tangata Whenua, our treaty partner, Nai Tamarawaho, invited us to Tamatea Pokai Whenua, us the council, and we were part of a visioning process. So it wasn't a council-led process, it was where we'd call it co-design now, but the hapu led that process, funded by Te Pōna Kōkiri. They invited all the authorities and the experts and the consultants in town to come and be a part of a conversation, a visioning discussion, where values were discussed and stories were shared. Not much to do about stormwater, but by the end of that day, everybody was really clear what we were really trying to do in the valley. And from that came wonderful concepts, huge whole of landscape scale, multiple wetlands, fundamentally and categorically not part of the stormwater attenuation for the lakes at all. And funny, it's a place where all underground utilities seem to want to coalesce. It's a who's who of underground infrastructure, power, gas, fibre optic, sewer, waste, the whole works. If you want to find it, it's down that valley. Why? Do utility companies insist on putting stuff like this in parks? We don't know. And it is not the path of least resistance, and it's a rubbish place to put this sort of stuff. But there was a turning point. The valley went from a place which felt no love whatsoever. It was a valley that had in the past been subject to subsidies to turn it into productive land from wasteland. And it was, for the most part, drained, or attempted to be. The river, the Kopurererua, was straight-lined to make it more efficient and to get that sediment to the harbour faster. And for the most part, it still didn't work. My first job at TCC in 1995 was in charge of something bizarre, to rescue a herd of cows that were stuck up to their necks in mud from great grazing country in the valley. And it just wasn't. So what happened from that point was a huge transformation. The river was realigned to its original course following a 2-year consent process. In those days, a 150 grand consent process over 2 years. It was a non-notified process in the end because we got every street to give us a letter of support in the end. We went not just house to house, but we went street to street, and we got to the point where we fought a whole amount of scepticism that the council would deliver this, but it wasn't the council that in the end delivered it. Huge highlights, which I'll flick through real fast because this is a softener for die. But in terms of realigning that river, we reached a really significant point where Moriho Ngā Taukau had the honour of reinstating the course of the river to its original one. A huge day for the original vision from Ngāi Tamarawaho in their marae. And that, believe it or not, is a councillor who, they have a habit of turning up at the right moment, but he brought his digger along and he did help out, bless him. And we start to get some of these values coming back into the valley. The key point for anyone here, if you're just a hardened stormwater engineer or whatever, is consider the value of a collective impact, what we'd call co-design now, with communities, and tangata whenua has underpinned this project, which has meant a social licence to operate, which has meant the funders followed. This was a $20 million project as estimated in 1999, and it's going to take that, but that money has appeared. Legacy photos, incredible to think now, but there used to be a lot of cattle there. This is the horror gallery, by the way. So cows that need to be rescued, gorse 4 times the height of a cow, just a who's who of perennial weeds, Chilean pampas grass featuring well there, where Honda Integras go to die, a small gallery of these, how to convert a car into a convertible while still in it, again a Honda, trail bikes, the whole works. All this was a behavioural change that we made sure happened. Arson, pick the crime that was happening. And the Waikato Appreciation Society featuring heavily. If we put up anything to start with for behavioural change, it got rammed, stolen, taken home. And there's contractors hiding behind that D4. It's a tough gig. But it was an environmental whole of landscape project with challenges. We solved this thing as a park, and yet, it's also a lake. There's a boardwalk with about 2 mils of freeboard there, but that's what valleys do, right? And there's a few slides here of the pathway to redemption, if you like. Everything, the who's who, the pest control, all the contractors got a turn, keeping vehicles out, those first interventions, if you like. Being bold, doing stuff that people said you couldn't do, like massive boardwalks. Bringing people back into the space, having corporate-sponsored visitor centres and induction areas at trailheads, and the houses that were at the end of the roads that were the worst houses are now the best houses with the best property values out of the whole lot. People desire an overlook of this valley now. Visitor centres, corporates running programs, fantastic, more birds, shiny, happy people, it had it all. But build it and they will come. Embryonic trails, trail network planning, and just bringing the public into it, and you can't stop them. These days, this is our vernacular. Society demands of us. And I guess this project hasn't been just having a sexy project, it's been about getting a social licence to operate. So this is what is possible, and a lot of this money wasn't from the ratepayer. So when you get people excited, they then fund it, whether they want to be seen or not. So this is the sort of thing which dare to have an idea and dare to go somewhere. And there's plenty of folks said this couldn't be done. It was a hospital pass. for the most part. This is a scheme that basically brings prisoners back into the real world, and there's a series of before and after photographs. We in this town get to grow a native plant, 1.5 metres in a year, so why not do that? And then this whole social licence to operate, bringing people back into a valley, creating a massive inner city park with recreation opportunities, and away you go. Mountain biking, learn to ride a bike, family, question, would you eat whitebait from this river? But it brings people in to do traditional activities. If there's such a thing as dog obedience, it's in the valley as well. A quick one from don't have this idea, don't ask again, stop asking, remove it from the budget, 3 times, raise it again, you'll be fired, was this bridge. And in the end, one of the ideas was joining the 2 ridges together, Otamotai to Te Papa. And we were sort of told not to raise this, but in the end, we kept producing pictures of what has happened at Whare Paiwaka, a bridge across the toll road. It couldn't be done, and 15 years later, the danger of a great idea came to fruition. So these are particularly happy people at the official opening. And a farewell from the people of the land. If there's a few lessons in this, it's about co-design, working with other people, and being bold and audacious. And not just one sector doing a job, so not just stormwater engineers or not just parks people, but bringing together the power of a team and a good idea. Thank you. Di.
Okay. Hard act to follow. Geoff's a much better speaker than I am. I'm a horticulturalist by trade. I served my apprenticeship pretty much with Tauranga City in the Gordon Carmichael Reserve, and that is a really more of an integrated stormwater project, come parks project. Everybody thinks of it now as a wildlife sanctuary, however, it's actually a stormwater land. And I worked on that for 10 years prior to being given the valley after the restructure, as things happen and you get something. So in about 2015, I got the valley. And to start with, do I have to push it again? I didn't know what I was getting. I was really nervous. It was fraught with issues. There were all sorts of issues going on in it, and we were trying to develop a reserve. No, that's Geoff's one. Can we go to the one that's next to that on the left, on the right-hand side? So, if you let me know when it's there. So we basically, in about 2015, we had a reserves management plan that was nearly complete. It was completed, and it was time to redo it. And we got Rebecca Ryder from Boffa to come and put together the next plan, which we worked. It took us a couple of years. We had a lot of consultation. All the affected parties came along. There was Rotary Trust, NZTA, Tauranga City, the stormwater guys, obviously, the parks people, Ngāi Hall were the big player. Yeah, a lot of people, and we sat around a big table, and it took us probably a good 18 months to develop the next 10-year plan. And basically, I'm at the bottom of the heap, and I just have to do and deliver what I'm told. So this is where we are now. What I'm going to talk you through is what we've got, some of the issues. I produced this PowerPoint about 6 months ago for a regional council presentation, so it's not really relevant to this, but I think it will give me the prompts to tell you anything that's important. So I'll just... So this financial year, 2019, I've got Tonkin and Daler doing a preliminary design report for the next river realignment. Sorry, I did that last year, actually. This year, I've hired Tonkin and Taylor to do the concept plan and the engineered drawings, so we can go to tender next year for the construction, and then the following year, we'll be putting that into place. And I'll talk you through that. But so I got given this project. I knew that I was going to have $710,000 this year to deliver a river realignment. Hello, I'm a horticulturalist. It's like, where do you start? What do I do? So I took the initiative last year to use some of my smaller budget to get Tonkin and Taylor on board, and I approached regional council land management officers that are relevant to the Kopurererua catchment, engineers, stormwater, everybody I could think of, got them together to start this project because I knew I didn't know what I was doing and I needed experts around me. But it is a parks project and everybody else wants to get really involved and take their issues and put their issues in first, but at the end of the day, so what does it mean to parks? Walkways, biodiversity, recreation, all sorts of things. So we've retired. During this new management plan, we made a grazing retirement plan, which is due to take about 5 years. We're 1 year into it, so we've got about 4 years left to go. There's 2 grazing leases down there, and yes, it is a contentious issue, but it's very difficult to manage, and we have a plan and we're working to it. And so as we retire the grazing, we can do some planting and get on top of the weeds and plan it, and we're taking the worst affected areas first, obviously. So we had a big barn fire down there last year that sucked up about $100,000 worth because it was asbestos we didn't even have programmed for, and the rapid cycleway got sealed. Thank you to Transportation who came along, and they had a lot of money from NZTA, and this was a real win for them. Prior to that, the main commuter track was a muddy farm track. So we now have an engineered cycleway, which is fantastic. Heavily used. Interestingly enough, the users change during the day. In the morning, you've got all the commuters on there, and they come from the city and they go to Tauranga. Who would have ever thought that? We all thought they were going to come from the lakes and go to the city, but the greater numbers are all going to Tauranga because that's where the work is. And then during the day, during the week, you've got the retired people on their e-bikes, and in the weekends you've got the families. So it's really interesting. This is the pā site, Puki Pā, of great significance to Ngāi Tamarāwaho. Last year I had to fell all of the lumber off that pā site. It's an archaeological site. Had to be very, very careful not to damage it. We've done it. It's completely bare now. I'll show you a bit later. We've got a planting plan for it, and hopefully we'll be starting that this year. Also have a engineer's plan from Stellar Project Deliveries up in Auckland, and there we're going to be building a floating walkway up and across that. So we're protecting the archaeology, which will be a real feature in the valley. So this year we're doing the technical design. We've got more track upgrades. I've got all the prices in here if anybody's got any questions about that. Basically, we've got 710 this year. I think we've got about 500 next year, and so it goes on. And there's some big figures in there, particularly around the major construction work. I don't think there's ongoing Willow control. We've changed our control method with the Willow, where we used to get in there with big diggers and rip it all up, but there's actually really nice habitat under there. And it's like, why? That's such a shame to do that. So now we're just killing the willows, poisoning the willows, in the best fashion that which is a basil method, poisoning them, and then they're falling over and just self-destructing over years, and so we're keeping all the habitat alive underneath it. Much slower, mind you. Yeah. So these are some of the biodiversity. Yes, we've had a seal who comes up the valley and lived there for a good 6 months. We've got fern birds. We've seen bitterns. They're very, very rare, but they've been seen in there probably about 5 or 6 times over the last 10 years, and hopefully we'd like to stop, and one day they'll breed down there. So in 2001, we're putting a set of toilets in at Faulkner Street. We will still need CCTV on them because of the vandalism. It's a very isolated site, and we all know what happens in those sites. The young people love to get down there and make mischief. More grazing retirement, and we are just planting, as we retire the grazing, we're doing like a 50% cover, so that we don't get very conscious of SEPTED reasons, crime prevention through environmental design. where we just bush it all out and then the people are too scared to go there. Sorry, okay, I'll quick. Thank you, Claudia. These are the people that we're using it for. It's very important for public access. We've got so many suburbs that we are linking all across the city. I can't even begin to name them all. Heaps going on. So this is our plan going forward. And that is a picture of the park. It's a painting. It's not very well seen, but you can see it if you get in there and discover the trails. It's up on the entry point to Whakapaiwaka, and you'll see that when you're there. I think that's about it, is it? Issues are all of the, what do we call it? The infrastructure. All of the infrastructure that is in there, we've got everything, as we've already talked about, and that makes it really difficult to do anything in there. So, any questions? Thank you. Shall I quickly? No, you do it.
Oh, just
quickly.
Really quickly, our final slide was just to profile something that not many people know, is that the Valley won the New Zealand Outstanding Park Award, the top national park award in 2018. And the judges cited in particular the relationship with Ngāi Tamarawahol, the joined-up nature of the professionals, and very much a long game through establishing a lot of community involvement, and it's the success through its use. So well done, Di, and TCC and others.